The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Chapter 3, Quasimodo the Hunchback. I looked up at the stage. A horrible creature was peeking through the hole in the wall, a creature with only one gleaming eye. Its face was ugly, perhaps the ugliest face I had ever seen. The monster was so horrible that some people turned and ran away, but bolder people leaned forward for a closer look. "It's Quasimodo, the hunchback," a man in a tall hat shouted. "It's the mad bell ringer," screamed an old woman. She covered her eyes in fear. "A monster," said a pretty young woman in the crowd. "Let me see." "It's not a monster," said a handsome young knight named Phoebus. He was wearing shiny armor and sitting on a horse. "That's the Hunchback of Notre Dame," the young knight told the crowd. So this was Quasimodo. I remembered that day, years ago, when I had first seen the beast that Claude Frollo had named Quasimodo. Though he was horrible then, he was even more horrible now. "Who is he?" the woman asked the knight. Phoebus pulled off his helmet and scratched his blond head. "Quasimodo is the adopted son of Claude Frollo, the archdeacon of Notre Dame," Phoebus answered. "Though he is deaf, he makes the bells sing every day." "How can a man who cannot hear be a bell ringer?" the man from Ghent asked. "By the Lord's blessing," Phoebus answered. "Or curse," said the merchant with a shudder. He could not stop staring at Quasimodo. Many people listened to what Phoebus said. Most of them had never heard of Quasimodo. They stared at the hunchback. I stared too. Never had I seen such a monster. A tangle of red hair topped Quasimodo's malformed head. His face was twisted, his eyes uneven. One eye was almost closed and was all white like milk. The other eye was open and stared back at the crowd. Quasimodo's nose was flat and pushed to one side. The hunchback's mouth was open and twisted. His two teeth were crooked like the rest of his face. One tooth stuck out from his jaw like an elephant's tusk. Spit dribbled and dripped from his slack lips. The people looked at the bell ringer with horror. Some were afraid of him because he was so ugly, but a few people were beginning to cheer and clap. Then Quasimodo surprised everyone by howling like a dog. His mouth opened and his face twisted even more. As one, the crowd seemed to understand. That awful howl was his laugh. When the mob saw Quasimodo smile, they all began to cheer. A winner was finally found. Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, was elected the ugliest man in Paris. He was crowned the King of Fools then and there. The people cheered Quasimodo. The merchant from Ghent motioned for the bell ringer to climb down the ladder. Quasimodo was too excited to waste time for that. He ignored the ladder and simply jumped down from the barrels. The merchant went to meet Quasimodo. Other men rushed forward to greet the new King of Fools. Everyone got a closer look at the hunchback, and the crowd again marveled at his ugliness. Poor Quasimodo's body was as twisted as his face. His head sat between two uneven shoulders. He had no neck. A curved hump grew from his back like a camel's. He moved toward the people. His legs were short and bent. Because he was short, Quasimodo walked like an ape. He leaned forward, and his hands touched the ground with each step. His clothes were ragged and dirty, and they did not fit right. People near him moved away in fear as Quasimodo passed by. Quasimodo thought his part in the festival was over. He made ready to return to his home in the bell tower. But before he could leave, a poor beggar stopped him. Other beggars came up and shook his hand. The merchant from Ghent had already told the crowd that it was the tradition each year for the beggars to carry the King of Fools through the town. The beggars had even built a special chair for that purpose. One beggar took Quasimodo's arm. Other beggars set the chair in front of him. But poor Quasimodo was confused. He could not hear and wondered what they wanted. Finally, he sat down in the chair. The beggars in their ragged clothes gathered around Quasimodo. Everyone was cheering him, and soon the hunchback began to laugh. A parchment crown was brought forward and placed on Quasimodo's head. A cape made of many different pieces of cloth was placed over his hump. Quasimodo kept on laughing when the beggars picked up the chair. The people clapped and danced around him. The beggars carried Quasimodo around the square so that everyone could see and greet the new king. Only then did Quasimodo know that he was crowned the King of Fools. Quasimodo's heart swelled with pride. He had never been so honored. Quasimodo began to act like a king. He sat on the throne as straight as his crooked back would allow. He pulled his ragged cape over his shoulders and waved to the people. "Hooray for the King of Fools!" the mob shouted. The beggars carried Quasimodo through the square, out of the plaza, and through the streets of Paris. The crowd followed with happy cheers. "Long live the King of Fools! A new King of Fools is crowned! Hooray for Quasimodo! Hooray for the Hunchback of Notre Dame!"